I respect Joe Schmo because even though he's gay, he doesn't make it his whole personality like some people do. I respect gay people, but some of them just take it too far. Being gay wouldn't be a big deal if gay people wouldn't make it such a big deal. Most of us have heard some variation of the three phrases I just stated above. Some of us are even the ones to say them. This sentiment is not new and has plagued the queer community for years. There is this idea that most queer people are quote-unquote normal everyday people. They go to work, they have families, they go out and have drinks with friends sometimes, just like straight people. And that is why queer people deserve respect. People who subscribe to this idea, in turn, look down upon the quote-unquote weird, loud queers. The ones who are very outspoken about their identity. The ones who dress unconventionally, perhaps even with pride flags on their clothing. The ones who simply don't want to assimilate into a cis heteronormative society. These quote-unquote undesirables, in turn, get shunned, even from their own community. A big section of these queer people who are excluded are trans and gender non-conforming people. And that was the situation our subject of this episode, Sylvia Rivera, found herself in. Along with discussing the contributions of Sylvia, I would also like to use her story to answer this question. Should the queer community be shunning the nonconformists? Hi, I'm Nix, and welcome to the Pride series, where I talk about influential queer people. A quick list of trigger warnings before I start. I will be talking about general bigotry in this episode, specifically homophobia, transphobia, racism, homelessness, police violence, suicide, and child sex work. I will also be using outdated queer terms that may be seen as derogatory in today's standards. This is because at the time period I will be talking about, these terms weren't derogatory, they were simply the vocabulary queer people use to describe themselves. If any of this stuff is upsetting to you, I would recommend not watching this video. Another thing I want to add is that Sylvia's story overlaps a lot with another person I discussed about in a previous episode, Marsha P. Johnson. This is because the two of them were lifelong friends and worked together in their activism, so if some of the stuff I bring up in this video seem the same as the Marsha video, that's why. Now that I explained all that, let's move on to Sylvia. Sylvia Rivera was born in 1951 in New York City and was assigned male at birth. Her mother was Venezuelan and her father was Puerto Rican. When she was 3, her mother committed suicide, and her father did not take care of nor pay child support for her. So, her grandmother raised her. Sylvia continued to enjoy feminine things, which would lead her to being bullied. Because of how much this negatively affected her grandmother, Sylvia ran away at the age of 11. She ran to a neighborhood famous for its queer scene, Greenwich Village, which is in Lower Manhattan of New York. In order to survive on the streets of New York, Sylvia started to do sex work as a literal child. Many of the local drag queens took her under their wing, one of these people giving her the name Sylvia. Among these queens was a trans woman named Marsha P. Johnson, who became a lifelong friend and mother figure to Sylvia. Marsha was around 17 when the two met. Just like many people during this time, the Stonewall Riot drove Sylvia to dedicate her life to queer activism. I will give a brief overview of the Stonewall Riot. If you listen to me discuss it in other episodes, or you have a good grasp on the information, I will give a timestamp on the screen of when I stop my overview, so you can just skip to there. In the 50s and 60s, it was illegal to be gay or trans in America. People could not dance with people of the same sex, and if you were caught wearing clothing that did not fit the sex you were assigned to at birth, you would be arrested. If just existing as a gay person was illegal, it is not shocking that bars catering to gay people were constantly shut down and raided. One of these bars being the Stonewall Inn, which was located in Greenwich Village, where Sylvia was living at the time. This bar was actually run by the mafia, because the only people willing to make money from a gay bar, something that was illegal, were people who were already doing illegal things. The Stonewall Inn would frequently get raided. Many of the patrons who got arrested would be assaulted by the police in various ways, and when being held in jail would be harassed by other prisoners and cops alike. After a raid would happen, the mafia would simply open up the doors to the bar, and it would be business as usual. June 28th, 1969, was one of these days that the police decided to raid Stonewall. Things did not go as planned, though. The people inside the building were not cooperating like the police expected them to. Outside of the building, a crowd was gathering, watching as police loaded people onto wagons that would send them to jail. Not long after, things started to get violent. People started to throw things like bottles and pennies at the cops. The violence escalated to a point the tactical police force had to be brought in to disperse the crowd. This event was a turning point in queer activism, and many people were inspired by the people who fought against the police to get involved in the movement. Now, there's a lot of conflicting information about whether Sylvia was actually at Stonewall when it happened or not, so I won't say with full confidence if she was or wasn't there. Whether or not she was there, it was clear she was serious in her activism. She joined groups like the Gay Liberation Front and the Gay Activist Alliance. The problem was, these groups did not want to be associated with people like Sylvia. To them, she gave the queer movement a bad name, because she was, as I mentioned before, one of the quote-unquote weird queers. Because of this, her and her friend Marcia decided to create the Street Transvestite Action Revolutionaires, or STAR. Like I talked about in the Marcia video, transvestite is an outdated queer term, and it can be seen as derogatory to many people. In contexts like this, it isn't being used in a bad way, but I wouldn't just throw this word around. But back to Sylvia. STAR was an activist group that welcomed in people who were shunned by groups like the Gay Liberation Front. Along with that, Marcia and Sylvia created the Star House, where they sheltered homeless queer youth. Star House started out as an abandoned truck where the kids could sleep in and eat breakfast in the morning. Sylvia and Marcia eventually were able to rent an old rundown building for them and the kids to live in. The group fixed it up and made it a true home. Unfortunately, Sylvia and Marcia were unable to pay the rent for the house, and they got evicted. This was partially due by the fact that it was hard for trans women like themselves to get a job. It was a big reason why they resorted to sex work. Despite this, STAR continued to be a haven for marginalized queer people, especially people of color. Before and after Star House, the group would attend pride marches. Organizers of these marches tried to ban STAR from attending, but they would go anyways. During one of these events in 1973, the organizers of the Pride had guest speakers go up on the stage and talk about queer issues. Sylvia and Marcia were prohibited from speaking, but Sylvia took the microphone and angrily pointed out that activist groups want to exclude drag queens and trans people from their work, but the queer movement existed from the labor of trans people, specifically trans people of color. A good example of this was the Stonewall riot, where many drag queens and trans people of color were on the front lines, fighting against the police. Another thing Sylvia helped fight for was New York's Sexual Orientation Non-Discrimination Act, or SONDA. This act, quote, prohibits discrimination on the basis of actual or perceived sexual orientation in employment, housing, public accommodations, education, credit, and the exercise of civil rights, end quote. Sylvia would go out and get people to sign a petition to get the act passed, and even got arrested while she was doing it. I believe it was because she was quote-unquote cross-dressing. Despite the energy she put into the passing of this act, the groups who had been advocating for SONDA decided to exclude protection for trans people in the hopes that it would have a more likely chance of it getting passed. The exclusion did not prove to be effective. SONDA was first introduced to the New York State Assembly in 1971, and it wasn't passed until 2002. Later in life, Sylvia would fight to get protection for trans people into SONDA. Like many trans people at this time, Sylvia struggled with homelessness throughout her life. In 1997, she would find herself living in the Transy House. Founded by Rusty Mae Moore and Chelsea Goodwin in 1995, Transy House was modeled after Sylvia and Marcia's Star House. Rusty Mae Moore had this to say about Star, quote, I think the historical significance of Star is that it was probably the first political/social initiative of the trans community in New York City, and certainly the first focused on the problems of throwaway youth in our community, end quote. Sylvia lived and also worked with Transy House with their activism. They worked with groups like the National Transgender Advocacy Coalition, which was a political and advocacy organization that lobbied for trans rights at the federal level in the United States. In 2000, Sylvia would travel to Italy for World Pride. For those of you that don't know, World Pride is an international pride celebration that is held in a different city each year. Sort of like how the Olympics are held in different places. Sylvia was considered an honored guest there. In 2002, Sylvia died of liver cancer, but her memory continues to live on. The Sylvia Rivera Law Project was founded in her honor, and works to, quote, guarantee that all people are free to self-determine their gender identity and expression, regardless of income or race, and without facing harassment, discrimination, or violence, end quote. The Metropolitan Community Church of New York, who Sylvia was a member of for many years, founded the Sylvia Rivera Food Pantry and Sylvia's Place, which aims to house and feed marginalized queer youth. In addition, the intersection of Christopher and Hudson Street in Greenwich Village, which is very close to the Stonewall Inn, was renamed Sylvia Rivera Way. So, should the queer community shunned Sylvia the way that they did, all because she was trans, a person of color, and homeless? Mind you, the reason she was homeless and also a sex worker was because she ran away at 11 and had no other way of making money. So was it okay to abandon someone that vulnerable because you want to look respectable? Did Sylvia and Marcia hurt the queer community in the long run by housing homeless queer youth? Did it hurt the community in the long run when their own Star House inspired other people, like Rusty May Moore, to create the Transy House? Was it worth it to exclude trans people in Sonda when it still took over a decade for it to be passed in New York? When we allow ourselves to fight amongst one of each other, nothing meaningful will ever get done. Something that is always important to remember is that none of us are free unless all of us are free. And that goes for every marginalized group. And just because someone handles who they are differently than you doesn't mean that they deserve less respect than you. This society, as we know it now, was built to hurt people like Sylvia. And if they don't want to just simply integrate into it, they shouldn't have to. And it's understandable that they don't want to. Because it doesn't only just hurt people like her, it hurts everyone, even people that it's meant to suit. Because now we all get caught in a performance, one that we all will spend our whole lives trying to perfect. But that's the thing, it's impossible to perfect. No matter if you're straight, cis, white, it doesn't matter. And the only way that we can make a difference is if we all work together. Not exclude those that we don't understand or that we think is icky and weird. And despite all the obstacles that Sylvia had to go through, she still did good and created a lasting legacy. And I think she is a good example as to why we should not shun anyone for how they present themselves. That is a wrap for Sylvia's story. I hope you learned a thing or two in this video, and I will see you in the next one.